So first up is House File 2335, the omnibus or the housing finance budget bill. So Representative Howard moves that House File 2335 be placed on the general register. So good morning, Representative Howard. And would you also like to move the A17 amendment to get the bill in the shape you'd like?
Chair Olson, I would.
Great. So would you just briefly describe the A17 amendment, please?
Chair Olson, members, the A17 authors amendment makes some reallocation of resources, the largest being drawing down some of the debt service on housing infrastructure bonds and instead directing those resources elsewhere in the tails. We also include a change that would expand flexibility for greater Minnesota housing authorities to build more workforce housing, a change that adds more specificity to uses within the stable housing organization relief bill that's included, and technical changes suggested by nonpartisan staff. As referenced, we also pulled out the $50 million in FHPAP that has already been signed into law by the governor.
Great. Any discussion to the A17 amendment? Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Chair Howard. So you're reducing the bonding authority to a couple of these programs in order to have more dollars in the tails, I imagine, in the past. How is that going to impact those two areas that are going to be reducing the funds? Is that going to impact their ability to do the projects that they want to do?
Representative Howard.
Chair Olson, Representative Petersburg, in total, for housing infrastructure bonds between cash and what we're doing in housing infrastructure bonds after this amendment, we'll be directing $266 million to the housing infrastructure bonds. So it's a considerable amount that we'll use for production. Specifically in the tails, we'll have $66 million in housing infrastructure bonds. And where we're putting those money in the tails is into the Bring It Home housing vouchers at $20 million per year.
Representative Petersburg.
Thank you. And I just wanted to comment and commend you on actually pulling back some debts and actually reducing some of the costs for later, because I think that's something maybe we can continue to do more of throughout this session. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any further discussion to the A17 amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails and the A17 amendment is adopted. There's one more amendment to the bill, which is the A14 amendment, which is the grant review language we have been doing with each of the budget bills. So Chair Howard moves the A14 amendment. Any discussion to the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails and the A14 amendment is adopted. So to your bill now as amended, Representative Howard.
Thank you, Chair Olson and members of the committee. Before you is a bill that is the most comprehensive one to address our affordable housing crisis that the legislature has ever considered, as it should be, because Minnesota has never faced an affordable housing crisis like this, a crisis that's deepening, worsening, and threatening the economic security of families and the future of our state. Our budget target includes a $1 billion one-time investment representing, I would argue, our state's first substantial investment that anywhere near matches the scope of the challenge we're up against. Behind those dollars will be life-transforming positive impacts for tens of thousands of Minnesotans and all the ripple benefits that come from when Minnesotans have access to safe, stable, and accessible housing. I want to highlight a few of the key priorities and funding items in this bill. First, we're going to build a heck of a lot of homes that are desperately needed to meet our crushing supply-demand mismatch. As I mentioned, this bill includes more than $250 million in housing infrastructure bonds. Those are flexible resources that will allow us to build new rental housing that's desperately needed, also homes to own that are affordable. We include significant investment in Chair Hassan's homeownership production bill to build more than 1,000 new affordable homes to own. We invest in proven programs like the Challenge program, which has been an effective tool to build housing all across the state. We're investing in manufactured housing thanks to Representative Norris's leadership. Our state's largest source of affordable home ownership is manufactured housing, and we want to make sure that we're investing and protecting that. We also fund the Greater Minnesota Workforce Program, our state's primary tool to build much-needed workforce housing in Greater Minnesota. So those are the ways we're building more homes. 2, we're preserving the homes we already have with our state's first significant investment to preserve naturally occurring affordable housing. This will help us preserve more than 4,000 homes across the state, preventing displacement, preventing homelessness, and finally recognizing that the state has a role to preserve the existing affordable homes we already have. Third, we're proposing the state's most ambitious agenda in our history to create new pathways to homeownership. I already mentioned Representative Hassan's home ownership investment grants, but HIBS, Challenge, HECAT, local housing trust funds are all programs that will help us create more homes and create more homeowners, an area where I know we've had a lot of bipartisan agreement and discussion in our committee this session. In addition, we're creating an innovative first-generation down payment assistance program, thanks to Vice Chair Agbaje, that will create pathways to homeownership for more than 4,000 new home buyers. Fourth, we're beginning our work to end children's homelessness and ensure families have the housing stability they need by funding more than 6,000 state-based housing vouchers over the next 4 years. For members that have heard about this bill in committee, you know the life-changing ability that a housing voucher has for a family who's on the brink. And as you know, only 1 in 4 Minnesota families that qualify for a housing voucher receive one. This starts to crack the surface and bring us closer to a state where all Minnesotans have access to housing stability. Lastly, this bill focuses not just on the short term, but the long term. We are making historic one-time investments in this bill, but the reality is we're not going to solve our housing crisis with one-time resources. This is the right time and moment to bring forward solutions that actually match the scope of the challenges our communities are up against. That's why this bill includes a 1/4-cent Metro-wide sales tax increase to address our long-term housing crisis. This new resource would create 1,000 new units of affordable rental units per year, 1,000 new units of affordable homeownership per year, and fund 3,000 housing vouchers in the metro area, so vital to preventing homelessness for our families. Members, whether we're talking about ending the opportunity gaps in our schools, creating economic security for our families, creating healthier families, all roads lead back to home. And this bill will do more to get us there than any in the past, and I encourage your support.
Thank you, Representative Howard. Discussion to House File 2335. Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Chair. Representative Howard, what is naturally occurring affordable housing?
Representative Howard.
Chair Olson, Representative Monty, I really appreciate the question. It's something we've talked a lot about in housing, but is sort of not a super well understood concept for some. It wasn't for me. When I was a Richfield City Council member a few years back, so a naturally occurring affordable housing is housing that is affordable, but just by virtue, there's no sort of public subsidy attached to it. It's affordable often by virtue of its age, condition, et cetera. And so what we're seeing across the state, but pronounced in the metro area, is that we have some of these large, naturally occurring affordable housing, especially rental housing, that's either being purchased by investors on the coast and flipped and turned into luxury apartments that displace residents. That's what happened in my community when more than 2,000 residents were displaced when Crossroads at Penn was purchased. The other challenge is that a lot of this housing is not quality housing, and our residents really struggle. So what this resource that we're providing would do would help with the rehab of the existing naturally occurring affordable housing, often that's owned by nonprofits, but it would also help the nonprofits acquire existing naturally occurring affordable housing and keep it affordable. One reason why this is so important as we talk about having affordable housing is it's less expensive to preserve the affordable housing we have than to build new. And so the state hasn't had a role in this, and they will after this bill.
Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Chair. And Representative Howard, follow up to that, and I'm sure we probably disagree on what the definition is, but what's your definition of affordable housing?
Representative Howard.
Chair Olson, Representative Notny, that's another good question. Affordable housing, the definition that we've used in our committee and I think is understood is it's depending on the person. Housing is affordable. The affordability standard often used is 30%. If you're paying more than 30% of your income in housing, that's not affordable to you. And right now, there's 590,000 Minnesotans that are cost burdened, paying more than 30% of their income in housing.
Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Chair. Representative Howard, is there someone making them take nicer housing or more expensive housing than they can afford?
Representative Howard.
Representative Novotny, Minnesotans, everybody would choose to pay for a house that they can afford. The challenge is that doesn't exist. We have an over 100,000 unit gap of housing, rental housing in particular, that's affordable for folks at those wages. And that's happened over year because housing costs continue to go up, far outpacing wages. And because we have this big supply-demand mismatch, there's simply not the homes available. A bill like this to create more housing is going to give people more freedom to have access to homes that they can't afford.
Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Chair. Representative Howard, you referenced these companies that are buying houses and fixing them up and then re-renting them. How is that different than the programs that you're talking about? And when they're done, doesn't someone then live in them when they're done? Those houses aren't going off the market. There's someone living in those houses when it's done. Isn't that right?
Representative Howard.
Chair Olson, Representative Novotny, specifically with naturally occurring affordable housing. So I referenced an example in my community, Crossroads at Penn. That was a 750 unit building that had 2,000 members of our community, including 150 children. So that was purchased by a developer. They changed all the rental requirements and raised the rent significantly. All of those families were displaced. 130 kids in our school district lost their housing. 40 of those kids experienced homelessness as a result of that. And yes, they rented it out at much higher income levels, and all those families were displaced, often having to go into homelessness or double up on couches or find housing that's even more unaffordable because of the extreme supply-demand mismatch. So that's the issue in terms of the naturally occurring affordable housing piece.
Representative Novotny.
I think we'll just have to, I can't take credit for the line, but affordable housing to me is usually nicer and more expensive than I can afford. We all make decisions on where we live, and as a man who rented early in his life, I rented what I could afford. Thank you.
Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Chair Howard. One of the other things that you didn't mention that makes them also naturally occurring and affordable is the fact that they were built without the current day regulations and zoning requirements and so forth in it. And that was kind of a nice thing because people could actually have supply and demand and capitalism and so forth, the things that really make things competitive. Is there anything in your bill that helps with the original cost of building a home? I know that there's a lot of stuff in your bill that talks about subsidizing after the housing is built and try to keep the price down, but that doesn't really help the overall cost and the development of building new homes. Is there anything in your bill that would help with that into the future?
Representative Howard.
Chair Olson, Representative Petersburg. First, I want to thank Representative Petersburg as a member of our Housing Committee. Always asks very good questions. I appreciate it. I would say that the biggest way that this bill is going to help bring down the cost of housing is addressing that supply-demand mismatch. A lot of the resources in this bill will leverage private investment, nonprofit dollars, and public investment to create more housing. And that is the critical thing we need to do to bring down the cost of housing. I know that there has been some conversation about policy reforms that we could take in sort of the arena of zoning. What's the state's role in local zoning planning? There aren't many of those provisions in this bill. I do think that we need to look at that, and in a policy session next year, I'm hopeful that we can move forward a significant piece of legislation in that arena as well.
Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Chair, yeah, I think that's something that we should be looking at next year. And right now, what you're dealing with is nonprofit side of it, but the for-profit side is the one that actually can do things cheaper and tends to figure out more innovative ways of being able to do it cheaper if we would just let them deal with it. And so I think hopefully that'll be in the mix as well, because I think that's a concern. I'm sorry, Madam Chair, there had a couple of other questions. I'll come back to that. Thank you. I don't have it right now.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative Howard, I've kind of lost track, but at one time there was a bill circulating, and I don't know if it's in this bill or not, your omnibus, but it basically restricted if a developer came and wanted to build homes just to rent, there was going to be a prohibition against that, or there'd be limits on it, like you could only have, a person could only have one other rental property or something to that effect. Is that policy in here?
Representative Howard.
Charles and Representative Scott, I think you're referring to a bill that of Representative Igbaje's that deals with corporate ownership of homes. That bill is not included in this bill.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My other questions were really what Representative Petersburg asked. We've seen the studies that housing that contribute to housing affordability in the state of Minnesota, and we know for a fact that 20% of the costs of building a home go to codes and restrictions and regulations, so that you could go across the border to Wisconsin and afford 20% more home just because of the overregulation on each house that's built here in the state of Minnesota. Is there anything in this bill that addresses all of that regulation so that we aren't in an unfair, a competitive disadvantage to our neighboring states?
Representative Howard.
Charles and Representative Scott, Representative Petersburg asked a little bit. There's no specific, there's a few minor pieces in the bill dealing with planning and zoning, nothing significant. I mentioned, I think we ought to look at that in a full policy year next year. I would also add, I think if you're only looking through the prism of that issue of sort of local planning decisions, I don't think that fully explains sort of the costs and benefits and what we look at in the, sort of our housing market here in Minnesota, either in greater Minnesota or in the metro area. I think that if we're going to truly address our supply-demand mismatch, we need to build more housing. That's the critical thing that's going to help us bring down costs. But there's nothing interim specifically or comprehensively in the local planning and zoning realm in this bill.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And one of the reasons I asked that question is a couple of years ago, someone from one of the cities that I represent that works for the city said that because of all the codes and regulations, that new homes are being built, and because there are so many of these regulations in place, builders are having to cut corners in other ways, to the point where this person told me that they could walk up to a new home in our city and kick in and go through the siding into the interior wall of the house because of all the other cost-cutting measures that builders are having to take. So that is very concerning to me, that not only if we're going to build all these new homes, that we do it in a way that they're going to withstand and be around for decades, instead of being kind of thrown up. And in order to make them affordable, the builder is going, well, I have to cut the corner here just to meet all the guidelines. The other thing I think maybe the Housing Committee should look at is, with the outward migration of 19,000 people last year, I want to know, did that increase the supply of housing? And if that trend continues, which I see no reason for it not to, that's probably going to put some more, housing on the market and make it available. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that or not.
Representative Howard.
Charles, I'll just say I've seen statistics that don't bear that out in terms of the outward migration.
Further discussion, Representative Scott?
Well, it's fact. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Petersburg.
Thank you. I remember I was going to just expound a little bit on the way we're going about reducing the price for housing for people actually promotes a higher cost. And that's because when we pay it on the top end, we don't do anything on reducing the original cost. And what that's going to do is promote a higher cost later. But the other question that I was going to add is there are a couple of spots, I was going to mark them and I didn't, so I don't have them there. But there are a couple of places in which legislative oversight, granting a grant ability to audit and so forth was removed from some of these provisions. With what has happened with child care and CCAP and some of the other things, does that give you some cause to do that? And why did you do that?
Representative Howard.
Chair Olson, Representative Petersburg. Well, one, with the amendment we adopted to the other bills, we have a little bit more robust grant and management oversight. There is lots of reporting in the bill. I'm not sure what specific, I'd be happy to follow up offline and figure out if there was a specific way that we took something in and out, because I'm not tracking that immediately. But for all the existing programs and new programs, there are robust reporting requirements to make sure that dollars are going where they need to go.
Representative Petersburg.
Yeah, thank you. I think one of them had to do with first home buyers no longer needing to be audited, or at least it was out of the realm of being audited. And I think there's another one in regards to maybe some childhood. I just remember childhood housing that no longer required grant oversight. So those are just some things to consider. I just didn't know why you were doing that, and I wanted to bring to your attention. Thank you.
Further discussion. Do you have anything more, Representative Petersburg?
No, I'm fine.
Okay. Representative Agbadje.
Thank you, Chair Olson. Thank you, Chair Howard, for bringing this forward. I just had, if you could just help expound a little bit more on kind of the ways that we're supporting public housing through this bill. I don't know if you talked much about that. I was a couple minutes late, but if you could just talk a little bit more about that and probably maybe the intersection with the housing infrastructure bonds that were included in this.
Representative Howard.
Chair Olson, Vice Chair Agbadje. I mentioned the naturally occurring affordable housing fund, which potentially could be accessible for public housing. Traditionally, public housing has been funded through general obligation bonds. I have had conversations with Chair Fu Lee about this work. I believe and expect there'll be a significant amount of public housing in Chair Lee's bill as he prepares to move that forward. I think it's vitally important that this session we meet the moment across the housing spectrum, including public housing. And so I think a bit of it's a question of in which bill, in which forum, but it's vital that the legislature meet the moment.
Representative Agbadje.
Thank you, Chair Olson. And Chair Howard, is it also possible, do you think, that housing infrastructure bonds might be another appropriate mechanism to continue to support public housing?
Representative Howard.
Chair Olson, Vice Chair Agbadje, I don't think there's a reason that it couldn't be. I think they haven't used that tool in the past, but we're putting more resources into it, so I think it is an option.
Representative Agbadje.
Thank you, Chair Olson, and thank you, Chair Howard. I think I'll just end on kind of a little bit of some comments. Just thank you so much for pulling this whole bill together. I think it really tries to address with the one-time funding that we were given, spaces from shelter to transitional housing to supportive housing to permanent housing, and particularly in the home ownership space. I think that's an area, particularly in the state of Minnesota and throughout our country, that we've seen a lot of detriment in the ability of more people to afford their homes. And I think we do a strong service to Minnesotans to ensure that there is that funding and support to be able to move into homeownership, because we know that that's a space where you can be more safe and secure and stable in your home. But at the same time, we're also making sure that people who may not want to be homeowners or maybe are not yet quite able to afford a home still have the opportunity to live in dignified and safe housing, particularly through the naturally occurring affordable homes program. And so I just want to continue to thank you for your work that you've been doing. We've engaged so many stakeholders, some who are for us and others less so. But I think this is a moment that we are meeting with the resources that we do have, which have been, I think, the biggest in a really long time, to really kind of show Minnesotans that we care about them and that we want to ensure that they have the most foundational aspect that they're ever going to have in their lives, which is dignified, safe housing. So thank you.
Further discussion. Representative Heinzman.
Thank you, Chair. Representative Howard, I don't specifically have a question, just a couple of comments. Listening to the discussion this morning, I haven't read the bill. I'm not on your committee, so I'm just kind of learning about some of the things that you're working on in here as I've been reading the brief and listening to the discussion. The naturally occurring affordability element in this is interesting to me, hearing that just recently over the last few weeks, kind of maybe even this session for the first time. And part of what I think might help folks if they're watching and wondering what are the actual physical characteristics of affordable housing, I think I can speak to that, at least, in greater Minnesota. An example of a way that we could get at that, and it doesn't sound like some of the regulatory issues that we're bringing up today are being addressed, but maybe an amendment, maybe down the road you and I could talk. But for example, just something that I experienced recently, when a septic system is designed, which is a greater Minnesota thing for the most part, blackwater capacity is something that is somewhat arbitrary, and you'll see differences all over the map. And just recently, a project that I personally was looking over, I guess, added an additional $2,000 of cost to a particular small home that was being built, because in this particular county, they decided that instead of the traditional capacity requirements, they wanted to double it. There's no scientific basis for that. It was just a decision that was made locally. And so on one hand, we like local control. On the other, it'd be nice to get at some of that regulatory difference between one municipality or one county or another and help guide that decision-making with some fact. And I'm not sure that this bill addresses those kinds of things, but a $2,000 difference just in one subject area, one category, and having been there from start to finish as a builder on many houses through the years, I see those things on a regular basis, and I don't know that the public really understands how each of those kinds of things can impact the overall cost. And naturally occurring affordability a lot of times in greater Minnesota occurs because there's more flexibility there than there is in maybe a city environment. A lot of times individuals can do the work on their own. You have an electrical inspection, you have a septic inspection, you have other folks coming in and confirming that that work is being conducted at a high level. But given the flexibility, there can be really some opportunities for folks to create that affordability just by sweat equity being involved in that opportunity. And I hope that those are the kinds of things that are also being discussed along with many of the other priorities here in St. Paul when it comes to affordable housing. I'm not sure that that's necessarily happening. If you could speak to that and show me in the bill maybe if I've missed it, that'd be great. But just those are my comments.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't think that we've talked about this yet, but it did come in a couple minutes late. I'm wondering if you could let us know the tax impact. It looks like there's a metro-wide sales tax increase. If you could just speak to that for just a minute, and then I do have a follow-up after that.
Representative Howard.
Chair Olson, Representative O'Neill, I mentioned in my opening that this does include a quarter-cent metro-wide sales tax in the 7-county metro area. How that would be, the resources that would raise, and we could, I don't know if this is in your packet or not. I do have a revenue estimate from when we were in taxes. In fiscal year 24, that would raise $151 million. It would notch up by fiscal year 27, it would raise $198 million. Those resources, 3/4 of them would flow directly to cities and counties to address their unique affordable housing challenges, so they could address, build more single-family homes or build more rental homes, address the housing challenges unique to their communities. That's 3/4 of it. 1/4 of it would be a resource for housing vouchers and fund about 3,000 housing vouchers for families in the 7-county metro area.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have a different spreadsheet that was in our packet with slightly different numbers, just ever so slightly, but what I see, and maybe the fiscal staff can confirm this, but it looks like the net impact, net fiscal impact, it has, the line is so small, 133 on our spreadsheet, and it looks like it says 153.1 million in total impact in the next fiscal, and then 391.2 million in the tails. So that's a sales tax increase on the 7-county metro. That's what's in my spreadsheet anyway, on the 7-county metro. So let me ask you this. As I'm looking through bills, and we do this in Ways and Means, obviously, and through our individual committees that we serve on, and I don't serve on your committee, so that's why the ask. Do you happen to know the totality of tax increases on the 7-county metro? Because I know you're not the only bill that's raising tax or fees and other things on the 7-county metro, if you happen to know that.
Representative Howard.
Chair Olson, Representative O'Neill, I don't know the exact amount. I know we heard a transportation bill that has a metro-wide piece as well, but I don't have the exact figure.
Representative Howard, and we probably wouldn't expect that of the housing budget chair, but thanks for trying. Representative O'Neill.
Madam Chair, I'm wondering if you would happen to know as the Ways and Means Chair, or we have the tax chair here, if she might happen to know, because I think these are really important conversations we need to have here in this committee as we put everything together. So I would hope that we know, somebody would know.
Well, Representative O'Neill, I think as every budget bill comes through, we will be able to examine those, and we had discussion yesterday with the transportation chair about the metro sales tax. We have not yet seen the tax bill yet, so I don't think we can say in totality about anything, but I think that is valid to ask every budget chair as we go through that question about within their budget area what they do. And I think as we see all the budget bills come out, we can have the broader picture of that as well. So, Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do you happen to know the tally thus far? Since I know there's a significant increase in the transportation bill that came through. I wasn't in the room, but I definitely was paying attention. So I'm wondering if you happen to have the tally of where we're at.
Representative O'Neill, I could certainly ask our fiscal staff to see if they have a sense of that, and we can try to do that. Otherwise, we can certainly, have discussion offline and find that number out later. I will go to Ms. Adrian.
Yes, Madam Chair and Representative O'Neill will work on getting that information for you.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And, since we are in the Ways and Means Committee, if that could be an ongoing conversation as, just continue to tally up how many sales taxes and fees. And, we had the environment bill that we combined with the energy bill, and there were significant fee increases in that bill. I don't have the tally in my head. I'm not quite that good, so I'm not quite there, but maybe tomorrow I will be. We'll see. But if we could, I have that as an ask. If we could start to look at what is the total, both, it seems like we're focusing a lot on the metro, and it'd be nice to see what's metro-centric and what's for the state. That's my ask, if we could continue to tally that as we come through. Thank you, Madam
Representative
Chair.
O'Neill, it sounds like Ms. Adrian's will get you that so far. You can certainly ask the questions, and our guidance here as we pass budget bills through is to mind the budget resolution and the overall spending. So within that, I do know we are staying within what we have set out for our target area in every area, including the taxes when we see that tax bill come through. But we certainly, and I trust that you guys will continue to ask that question, and that will be something that I bet your team is looking very closely at too. So Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate you saying that. And I think for me, it's just a matter of public transparency, because the budget resolution is a wonderful thing, except for the fact that it doesn't tell the full story, obviously, because you have a net, that's the net. And so you can have lots of increases and spending, increases in fees, taxes, and so on, and then increased spending. So I just want the full picture as we come through. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative O'Neill. Further discussion to the bill. Representative Youakim.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I just want to thank Representative Howard. I'm not sit on your committee, but I've been trying to watch it as bills go through, and because you're doing the heavy lift for almost all of our committees. Housing is really integral to folks' everyday life. It's hard to get a stable job if you don't know where you're sleeping at night. It's hard for a kid to learn in school where they don't know where they're going to lay their head at night. It drives our economy. The bill we'll have up next with childcare, same thing. We learned during the pandemic, people missed out on work because they had nowhere to send their kids. Housing is so very important, and if anybody does want to see what NOAA looks like, come to Hopkins. We're 65% rental. A lot of it was built before 1970. You can still find a one-bedroom apartment there for $900, which is still more than somebody making $15 an hour can afford comfortably. And it just is something that's so important for us to be investing in. It's part of our infrastructure that kind of crosses paths between our human and our physical infrastructure that we need to work on. And I'm glad folks are asking questions in Ways and Means about how this all fits together, because it all does. All of our budget bills fit together and hang together to make Minnesotans able to get to their jobs, to fulfill their lives, to have children, to produce money for our economy, to keep everything going. And it all does hang together, and thank you for being a big part of that.
Further discussion to the bill. Lead Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative O'Neill, in answer to your question earlier regarding the sales tax, just including only the sales tax increase that Representative Hornstein offered yesterday and passed, and just Representative Howard's sales tax increase, that's $1.2 billion in the upcoming biennium. In the tails, that's $1.5 billion. That's just those two sales tax increases. It does not include Mayor Carter's proposal for the sales tax in St. Paul. It doesn't include the motor vehicle sales tax increases. It doesn't include the license tab increases. That's just the metro area sales taxes are over $1.2 billion for the upcoming biennium. Madam Chair and Representative Howard, assuming that Representative Hornstein's bill becomes law and yours does as well, the sales tax in Hennepin County will be 8.53%. In the city of St. Paul, it will be 8.8%. And in the city of Minneapolis, it'll be 9.03%. Do you have, in ignoring the fact that we have a $17.5 billion budget surplus, do you have any concerns about that sales tax rate becoming so high that it's becoming punitive for commerce or economic activity?
Representative Howard.
Chair Olson, Representative Garofalo. I think that I guess my biggest concern related to economic competitiveness in housing is related to the extreme cost and elevating cost of housing in our region. I actually just saw an Onion article that popped up on my phone that said San Francisco realtors show couple earning under six-figure salary around neighborhood's best tent city. And we don't want to become a region where there's literally no accessible, affordable housing. That's essentially been the case in a lot of other regions. One of our economic competitive advantages in the Twin Cities region is our affordable housing. If we lose that, if we miss this moment, that is what's my biggest concern in terms of our economic competitiveness and why this, from an economic case, makes sense.
And,
Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Representative Howard. And I certainly understand how you want to spend the money, and I respect that. And I hear, I think you know the Onion's not real, right? Okay, I just wanted to facts. I mean, but at some point here, even, we have in transportation, Mayor Carter's sales tax increase, that's not your responsibility. But should these pass, that would be the sales tax in St. Paul, 9.88%. Is there a point at which you would say, like, okay, if the sales tax can't go any higher, regardless of how the money is being used, okay? Is there a point at which you personally would view the sales tax as being punitive and we shouldn't go above it?
Representative Howard.
Chair Olson, Representative Garofalo. I don't know if I have an exact, of course, right? But at this level, I think this tool is one that makes sense when you look at both sides of the ledger. something like regressivity should be a concern, right? But what's even more aggressive, I would argue the most aggressive part of a family's budget often is the cost of their housing. And half of all renters in the 7-county metro region are paying more than 30% of their income in housing, half. And so that is, again, where my concern lies, is if we have housing costs that keep going up by double digits year over year over year, outpacing wages, what is that going to do to our competitiveness? What is that going to do to the economic standpoint? And so I realize I'm not directly answering your question, but that is the concern and why something like this at a quarter-cent on the metro-wide sales tax for housing makes sense.
Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Representative Howard. So again, should your bill pass and Representative Hornstein's bills pass from yesterday, the sales tax in Minneapolis will be 9.03%. Is that too high?
Representative Howard.
Chair Olson, Representative Garofalo, again, what I would say is too high is the cost of housing when over half of the renters in the metro area are paying more than 30% of their income in housing. Many are paying more than 50% of their income in housing. In Hennepin County alone, family homelessness went up 265% just last year. And so we need to be thinking about both sides of the ledger. We need to be thinking about bringing new ideas to the table, and that's what this is.
Representative Garofalo.
Madam Chair and Representative Howard, so my final question on the sales tax then. So given Hennepin County is at 8.53%, that would be the sales tax, that'd be the new tax rate. Is there room for that sales tax rate, in your opinion, to grow higher?
Representative Howard.
Chair Olson, Representative Garofalo, that really isn't the focus of this bill. The focus of this bill is a quarter-cent metro-wide sales tax would be dedicated to housing. It would help us build 1,000 new affordable rental units, 1,000 new homes to own per year, 3,000 vouchers. Tens of thousands of Minnesotans would benefit from this modest sales tax increase in this bill.
Representative Garofalo.
So, Madam Chair, I have a handout for the committee. Earlier, Representative Scott. Thank you, Madam Chair. Earlier, Representative Scott had asked Representative Howard about concerns about negative domestic population migration. Do you want approval to see this before I hand it out, or can I just have staff hand
Representative
it out?
Garofalo, if you can pass out, that sounds great, Garofalo.
Okay, thanks.
We'll have the page passed out.
Can I have a page, take these, and if you could, please give a copy to Representative Howard first, and then pass it out to the committee. Because Madam Chair and Representative Howard, we certainly, we can have differences of opinion, but I was concerned when Representative Scott brought up the fact that Minnesota we're experiencing negative population migration, and you had said that something to the effect of you had seen different numbers. And I'm not going to ask you what those numbers were, but suffice it to say that someone tricked or misled you, because that's not happening. The numbers that you have in front of you, and I guess maybe I'll wait a little bit for.
Representative Garofalo, are you going to tell us where you got the citation of it? Okay, great.
Yep, so-
Representative Garofalo.
Thank you. And so, Madam Chair and Representative Howard, this is from the U.S. Census Department. That's what these numbers are. And what the column on the left shows is negative population migration. So this is the amount, if you take the number of people who left Minnesota to go to other states, and then you subtract from that the number of people from other states who have come to Minnesota. In addition, we could, if this isn't good enough, we can cite a Star Tribune article where the state demographer's office cites these numbers as well. But when you take that negative population, you take that population migration number, this is what you see on the left-hand side. What you see on the right-hand side is our overall population growth. So you'll notice that on the left, or on the right, Minnesota shows a 0.1% increase in our population, even though we experienced negative population growth. That is because we have extremely fertile moms in Minnesota, I guess. We have a higher birth rate than death rate. That's where that is being made up. But when it comes to people actually choosing where to live, when they're getting up and deciding where they want to go, you can see that Minnesota is now in the bottom 10 for negative population migration. And I don't want to overstate taxes as being the only reason, right? There's lots of reasons why people.
Representative Garofalo, I just want to remind everyone that we're on House File 2335, so I understand where you're going with your comments, and I think we've been pretty lenient with you passing it out. So could you please tie it back to House File 2335 and the Housing Budget and Finance Bill?
Thank you.
Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Representative Howard. Representative Scott tied this in earlier in her comments to Minnesota experiencing negative population migration, that we're now in the bottom 10, and that its impact on housing. So this is from the census data. I'm wondering if you could just elaborate, given this information, what effects you think it has on housing.
I want to note Representative Howard is here for House File 2335, making sure everyone in our state has an affordable place to call home. And I'm sure he can speculate a little here, but this is a little out of what I imagine he prepared for today. Representative Howard.
Chair Olson, Representative Garofalo, it is tempting to kind of just have a longer back and forth about this. I would note I noticed we don't see our neighboring states on this list. I've seen data that Minnesota is performing well in comparison with the neighboring states. As you mentioned, there are a lot of factors that go into, so I'll just leave it at that.
Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just the reason why I'm bringing this up is because Representative Howard had disputed Representative Scott's contention that we're experiencing negative population migration. And so we can have a debate about why more people are leaving Minnesota than coming back. That's not my intent, Madam Chair. My intent is just that we, as legislators, should agree on these basic facts that more people are leaving Minnesota than are coming back to our state. The reason why you don't see our peers on this list is because this is the bottom 10. So if you see Louisiana, you see California, that's why it's on there. So as it ties into housing, Representative Howard, you and I should be able to agree. We can dispute the reasons for it, but we should recognize that this is having an impact on housing. If you dispute the census data and that it's not true, then there's no need to continue the conversation. If there is an acknowledgement this is true, then we should just simply ask, how does it impact housing, specifically in the Twin Cities area?
Representative Howard.
Chair Olson, Mr. Garofalo, I will note that one of the main, you mentioned there's lots of reasons why people move. One of the main reasons that people move is access to housing. So if we want to increase people wanting to come to Minnesota, live here, increase our growing economic competitiveness, we should build more homes.
Okay.
Representative Garofalo.
But Madam Chair, can we agree that we're experiencing negative population migration? Because earlier you said you didn't. If we can't agree on that, then we can't really have a debate on it.
Representative Garofalo, I know we could probably have a longer conversation with the state demographer, and I know in different committees we do have that. So I think I'm going to let Representative Howard have one more crack at responding to this. But again, within the scope of what we're trying to do today, we're not debating this. There are many facts you all bring up every day that we could push back on and bring things in, and that's just not what we do. And so I think Representative Howard has been more than generous in answering this question. Representative Howard.
Chair Howard, Representative Garofalo, it's a fair topic. What I would reiterate is that if we want to meet this moment in terms of in totality of our economic challenges facing our state and region, we need to address our affordable housing crisis, and that's what this bill represents.
Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I certainly understand that sometimes, someone says there's lies, there's damn lies, and then there's statistics, right? But this is literally from the U.S. Census Bureau, and this is from the Star Tribune, and I understand that there's this is
Representative Garofalo, we are not here to debate the inward or outward flow of folks. We're talking about the housing bill, and I feel like we've had ample discussion based on the handout. Would you like to close on this bill? Otherwise, we're going to move to final comments from Representative Howard.
Okay. Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And if we can't agree on basic facts, we can't agree on solutions. So if you guys can't agree that's happening, then we'll just move on to vote on the bill and go on to the next bill.
Do you have any further comments on House File 2335?
Well, that's it.
Okay. Thank you, Representative Howard, for bringing House File 2335 forward and all the work you have done to make sure everyone in our state can have a safe place and affordable place to call home. So I will go to you for final comments on the bill.
Thank you, Chair Olson. I'll be brief. I wanted to, for my final comments, just bring to this committee the words of Amanda Woods, who shared her testimony with us this year in support of Minnesota vouchers, of which we're creating 6,000 in our bill here. She told us, I support creating a new Minnesota voucher program created in this bill because I have personally seen the transformational impact vouchers have. I have 3 kids, and we've experienced housing instability and homelessness over the last 8 years. What changed all of this is when I received a voucher connected to my unit at Cranberry Ridge in Plymouth. I was able to move into a 3-bedroom, 2-bath unit that provided enough space and stability for my family. My kids now go to Wayzata schools, and it has a big impact on their lives. My youngest daughter is in 1st grade, and after missing half of kindergarten, she started not being able to read or write. Now she's completely caught up. Now my girl can read a whole book and write her name. My middle schooler has special education needs, and having a stable home has improved his emotional and social skills. He now has the confidence to be in the same classroom as his peers. My oldest son now gets to just be a high schooler, hanging out with his friends and playing on the football team. All of this is possible for my family because of having a voucher. Members, this bill will be transformational for tens, if not hundreds of thousands of Minnesotans, because when we have access to a safe and stable home, we can thrive in our lives. And I thank every member for the discussion today and encourage your support.
Thank you, Representative with Howard. And with that, Representative Howard renews his motion that House File 2335 as amended be placed on the general register. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. No. The motion prevails and House File 2335 as amended has been placed on the general register. So thank you, Representative Howard.